Mastermind George Miller takes us one more time to the Wasteland to witness Furiosa's tragic tale of revenge. As you can see from the trailers, the movie is set 45 years after the collapse of civilization. Furiosa's journey starts the moment she's taken from the Green Place, and will follow her all the way through her 20s. The scope of the story is massive, it spans 15 years. You'll see Furiosa go from a mere hostage in the hands of the antagonist to a trusted war rig operator working for Immortan Joe. I had high expectations for this movie because Fury Road is an action masterpiece. The film blew me away, it's incredible. This new story focuses more intensely on the world building and the characters than Fury Road did. Because we're dealing with a prequel, Fury Road works as the finished painting, the finished work. You know the characters, you already have a good sense of the world, and you understand how harsh people's lives are in the wasteland. This film takes all of those existing components and deepens them. The most surprising aspect of this movie is how it imbues its characters with so much more suffering and pain. To understand this point, you have to look back at Fury Road. That film shows you a horrifying post-apocalyptic world, but there is almost a cartoonish element covering the surface of the story. It has a lot of energy, excitement, unbelievable stunts. It's a spectacle from start to finish. However, there's barely any blood in the movie, and it doesn't give you a visceral feeling when you witness the things that the characters go through. I would say this is the case for two reasons. First, because Fury Road has bizarre comedic elements that lighten the mood or give you a tiny breather in the middle of the action. For example, when Knox talks about how he named his tumors.
For a while, even Larry and Barry stopped chewing on my windpipe.
Who are Larry and Barry?
My mates. Larry and Barry.
Or when he says this.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Max being chained to Knox and a car door. Rictus in general.
Let me see.
Rictus!
I want to see!
Rictus, go see what's agitating Dad!
Max washing his face with mother's milk.
What is this?
It's mother's milk.
Even the guitar guy. The movie has several wacky and crazy elements that will make you laugh. The second reason for this feeling of unreality is the relentless pace of the editing. Fury Road clocks in at 2,700 cuts in 2 hours of footage. That's 22.5 cuts per minute. It's as if the movie was on crack, which of course worked for that film because of its frenetic nature, a long car chase from beginning to end. This editing style also accentuated the madness of the wasteland and the protagonist's unstable mental state. The characters in Fury Road suffer, fight, die, go insane. However, you can watch all of this suffering with certain detachment because of the movie's bizarre qualities and wild pace. Here in Furiosa, we have a different approach entirely. Miller created the rawest version of this wasteland for the prequel. Some of the same comedic elements recur in this film, but their effect is different. They operate in the background to give you a chuckle here and there. We still have Rictus. He even has a brother named Scrotus. The new villain Dementus is funny. The movie still peppers the world with zany elements, but it reserves the forefront to show you the carnage of the desert, how terrifying this world can be. Miller replaces the cartoonish feeling present in Fury Road with a layer of hellish brutality. This shift in tone is clear within the first 15 minutes of the film. You'll see a guy with his throat cut bleeding everywhere, with bubbles of arterial blood forming on his wound, trying desperately to speak. And when his words fail him, his tribe hangs him upside down so he can draw a map while he's dying, so they can extract information from him before he drifts into the abyss. From this opening alone, the movie's telling you that the narrative will go into gruesome territory. Furiosa takes a step back from the funny side of things and instead gives you mayhem. There's more violence and more cruelty in this film. You'll witness multiple executions in the story. People being quartered by bikes, eaten alive by dogs. You'll see close-ups of maggots eating putrefying flesh. It's a radical change in tone that injected a lot of intensity into the film. Some will say that maybe it was too much, but I say it was effective. If Fury Road is a story about rebelling, escaping, and hope.
Yeah, feels like hope.
At least that way, you know, we might be able to, together, come across some kind of redemption.
Furiosa is a story about descending to hell, a baptism by fire. In this story, the protagonist is taken from paradise, the place of abundance, and thrown into a living nightmare. The editing of Furiosa complements this new change in tone. The pacing here is more relaxed than in Fury Road. Don't get me wrong, you're still going to get breathtaking, high-octane, crazy action sequences with extraordinary stunts, but the overall flow of the scenes is less frenetic. The shots linger for longer. It will not bombard you with 22.5 cuts per minute. In Furiosa, you get more seconds between cuts to take in the scenery, the characters, and the destruction. The cuts never feel choppy and cranked up like they did during some sequences in Fury Road. In this film, Miller implements a more controlled approach that serves the narrative. The events of the film unfold in the span of 15 years. The large scope means you can't expect the movie to be on crack the entire time. Back in 2015, Fury Road got away with a faster and more energetic editing style, verging on insanity, because the movie is the culmination of Furiosa's story, even though Max is the protagonist. In this sense, the entire film functions as the climax. That's why it can go at full speed the entire time and hit you with 2700 cuts. The story in Furiosa is structured in chapters. They provided the plot with a sense of scale. There's a fade to black transition that signals the ending of each of them. I'll talk briefly about Chapter 1 because it encapsulates the bleaker tone of the film in comparison to Fury Road. The chapter ends when Furiosa witnesses the Mentos crucify her mother. There's a close-up of her face and the camera zooms in to the point where it disappears into her watery eyes, showing you the reflection of the crucifixion in her pupils, and then it plunges the entire image into darkness. The movie is letting you know you have entered hell itself. Anya Taylor-Joy and Alila Brown play Furiosa in the movie. Brown plays the child version of the character and Joy the young adult version. Both of them delivered fierce performances. They effectively conveyed the character's will to survive, her deep sorrow, and her thirst for vengeance. Furiosa doesn't speak much during the film. This is similar to what happened with Max in Fury Road and the other movies in the franchise. However, in Fury Road, it feels more justified because of the story. Max is just a hostage bloodbag. What is he supposed to say? And he actually talks when it is required. It's not like he doesn't have any dialogue. However, in this entry, Miller takes the concept of the strong silent protagonist and he stretches it for too long. This is a story that lasts more than a decade. I wish this hadn't been the case because it feels that it deprives the character of Furiosa from showing more depth. Joy plays the character for almost 2/3 of the movie and she had mostly her facial expressions to work with. Now, she does a tremendous job with the material she was given, but since this movie takes its characters front and center, or at least more so than the previous one, Furiosa could have used more lines. But overall, she was wonderful. Chris Hemsworth plays Dementus, the bad guy. He definitely stole the show. I loved his performance. Dementus is a sadistic, unhinged warlord, the leader of a biker gang that eventually clashes with the Morton Joe's war boys. He is charismatic, comically dark. There are multiple aspects of Dementus that the story explores. He's clever and crafty. He manages to outsmart the other Wasteland factions in more than one occasion with his strategies. The story presents him as some kind of post-apocalyptic Roman general with a pronounced theatrical flair. He loves grisly spectacles and rallying his troops with great speeches. Dementus doesn't want to see himself as just a brute conqueror. He wants to project the image of the sophisticated field marshal, the refined, fearless commander. He's constantly trying to expand his vocabulary. He loves using fancy words with the help of his trusty history man, who's always there to tell him the meaning of a term or a concept. That's my favorite aspect of his personality. It makes him a more compelling villain. He's a bad guy with depth. The way he leads his faction is pure Darwinian madness. In an interview, Chris had this to say about his character.
He's a complicated individual, the character I play. He's a very violent, insane, brutal person that is born from the wasteland, the product of his environment, and there's an intensity to him, there's a brutality. He has been birthed into a space where it's kill or be killed, and he's learned to rule with an iron fist. There's a charisma to him, and it's a very manipulative charisma.
Dementus was carved by the wasteland. He lost his humanity. The only trace of it he has left is the teddy bear he carries around. Chris also said this about working in Furiosa.
I think the best experience of my career. And I put more work into it than anything I've ever done. And the collaboration I had with George was just beautiful, and working with Anya was incredible.
You can tell how excited he was playing Dementus. It was a joy to see. The action in Furiosa is magnificent. Back in 2015, Fury Road gave us many unforgettable sequences. It presented a glorious spectacle of vehicular combat. Everything was cranked up to 11 to send the audience to Valhalla. This new film doesn't try to do more than Fury Road did. Instead, it maintains the same level of quality. It doesn't crumble under the weight of great expectations. George Miller once again injects fantastic ideas into these action scenes. All of the combat and the set pieces are top-notch. In particular, I'll mention a sequence that happens in the middle of the story where Furiosa fights alongside Praetorian Jack, a new character that serves as her mentor and her true ally. This section is outstanding. George Miller throws everything he has in this moment of the film. There are guys riding bikes and then deploying parachutes in the middle of combat. The flow is immaculate, the geometry is clear, you understand everything that's happening on screen. At the same time, the action has so much energy and power. The pace is aggressive, it feels like a set piece pulled from Fury Road and added into this film, a throwback to Furiosa and Max working together. It was the most ambitious action sequence of the movie, it was superb. The core idea that the story explores is revenge. Dementos has taken everything from Furiosa in brutal fashion. She goes after him looking for justice and retribution. This idea of revenge is easy to digest and there's not much to say about it other than it was well executed. The final confrontation between Furiosa and Dementos was engaging enough. This is the part where Furiosa talks the most, when she faces her tormentor. Sadly, I feel there was something lacking in this showdown. The narrative runs out of fuel at this point. Dementos delivers one final defiant speech, but these climactic scenes didn't have enough punch for me. Also, the whole concept of turning Dementos into a tree, I don't know man, I didn't feel it. There's a secondary aspect the film explores, which is war, and I found it to be more interesting than revenge. You see, it is not enough that human civilization collapsed and that Judgment Day happened. The Tartarian conditions of this post-apocalyptic world become even more intolerable by the actions of man. There is a constant brutal struggle for resources and survival. People tear each other apart in diabolical ways. At the beginning of the review, I explained the shift in tone, how this movie is more violent and bleaker than Fury Road. Well, during the third act, the story descends even deeper into the underworld. Dementos and Immortan Joe have their showdown, and this clash transforms the color palette of the film. The war montage looks like a feverish nightmare. It has an orange tinge combined with the black smoke of the battlefield. During the war, the movie doesn't show you epic battles or unbelievable stunts. You just see the piles of corpses on both sides, death reigning supreme in the wasteland. This is the part where the message becomes the clearest. You are seeing hell on earth. However, the twist here is that this is nothing new. Humanity has been warlike since we crawled out of the sea. Our capacity for brutality has always been a part of us as a species. The History Man gives a perfect introduction to the war. I loved that narration. The infernal landscape you're witnessing is not so distant from our world.
War is spectator sport. We are emperors of Rome, Andrew. Blood and steel, the only elements that ever meant anything.
By the way, in this section there's another example of what I mentioned earlier, the recurring of bizarre and comedic elements but with a different effect. In Fury Road, when the guitar guy shows up, he's just another wacky background character of the film. Of course you're gonna have a guy using a flamethrower guitar hybrid. It makes perfect sense. It's so over the top that it makes you laugh. However, when he shows up briefly here during the war sequence, he looks haunting, a nightmarish vision. The movie doesn't want to end on a grim note, so to avoid that, there's hope at the end of this crucible, when Furiosa takes the wives in the war rig, which sets the plot of Fury Road in motion. But here's the thing, by that point, the movie has already planted the idea in our minds. War is here to stay, whether we have civilization or not, it doesn't matter. The impulse for combat and conquering will always be there hunting us, even if they are lurking in the background for the time being. Furiosa is a terrific film. It gives the characters depth without sacrificing impressive action sequences. Don't miss it. Go and watch it in IMAX if you can. At the time of recording this review, it is clear that Furiosa is not doing well at the box office. So there's a possibility this might be the last Mad Max film we have from George Miller. If that's the case, I'm happy, because he gave us one last Wasteland masterpiece. Before you go, answer this.
The question is, do you have it in you to make it epic?